Hello and welcome everyone to the Party Animal Podcast, episode number 12, New Year's Eve celebrations. I'm Thomas.
And I am Luna. We're so glad you could join us for a really close look into what makes these big celebrations tick.
That's right. So for this one, we've gone through a huge amount of material articles, studies, and some really compelling personal stories.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to really pull out the key insights about New Year's Eve. You know, it's that symbolic fresh start we're all after.
Right, the clean slate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we want to contrast that high expectation with the very real and specific risks that can make the whole night just completely unravel.
We're really trying to move past the obvious stuff here. The goal is to give you a kind of shortcut to being truly informed about the pitfalls of this one night in particular.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do a really in-depth exploration of the material we have, starting with a very detailed story. An anecdote.
It's like a case study, almost.
Yeah. Yes. And then from there, we'll systematically break down the 6 big risk categories that kept coming up. Ultimately, we want to help you understand what separates a genuinely memorable start to the year from, an experience you'd rather forget.
Okay, let's do it. Let's jump right into that narrative. We're starting with the story of Jordan, a young professional.
Mm-hmm.
And Jordan decided to go big for New Year's, really big, choosing one of the most intense places on the planet to celebrate. Las Vegas, Nevada.
That choice alone really sets the stage, doesn't it? Choosing Vegas for New Year's, that's not just a trip. It's like you're investing in a specific feeling.
It is.
You can just feel it in the descriptions we read. Jordan and the whole group were completely bought into the promise of the ultimate fresh start, the absolute peak of what a celebration could be.
And the plans reflected that. They were anything but casual. I mean, they set the bar so incredibly high.
Almost impossibly high.
Yeah. We're talking secured tickets for an exclusive rooftop party.
Mm-hmm.
Right on the Strip, the kind of place where everything just feels elevated, untouchable.
Right.
They had premium bottle service locked in, which, as we'll see, really changes the whole dynamic. There was live entertainment and, of course, that perfect, spectacular view of the midnight fireworks over the skyline.
And Thomas, the carefulness of that planning, it actually feeds the emotional pressure.
Oh.
You've put in the time, a lot of money, and so much hope into this one single perfect evening. The material described Jordan's excitement as just intense. And it was driven by the atmosphere alone, the music, the people, the laughter, that feeling of a fresh start. It's this collective energy, this social buzz that is genuinely intoxicating.
Yes. Even before a single drink is poured.
Exactly. It's just a pure shot of adrenaline and social expectation.
You completely nailed it. It's that energy, that shared desire for perfection all at the same time. And what we found is that this creates a massive internal pressure.
The best night ever.
Pressure.
That's the one. And that intense expectation is what starts to warp your decision-making, especially as the night goes on. Right. When you've paid that much money for a night, the impulse to slow down or, take a break, it almost feels like you're failing at having fun.
And what's so fascinating here and so important is that this wasn't about ignorance. Jordan actually had some very specific warnings before things even got started.
Yes, the wisdom before the storm. The material mentioned an older cousin who had clearly learned some lessons the hard way.
She'd seen it before.
And she shared these very specific cautionary tales. It was a real attempt to ground all those high-flying plans in a framework of safety.
That's such a critical detail. It's not that Jordan didn't know the risks. It's that the sheer power of the environment just steamrolled that rational knowledge. And the cousin's advice, Luna, it was so practical. She specifically warned about pacing, emphasizing that New Year's Eve isn't a sprint.
No, it's a marathon. It can be an 8, 10, even 12-hour event. It requires a strategy.
A strategy for hydration, for food, for staggering your consumption. It's a real logistical challenge.
Yes, and beyond the pacing, her advice was really about security. She stressed how absolutely critical it is to stay physically connected to your group.
Especially there.
Especially in a place like the Vegas Strip where you have millions of people all moving around in a very small space. It's paramount.
And she also mentioned keeping a meticulous, an accurate count of your drinks, which is something Jordan actually intended to do at the start of the night.
But that's where the bottle service comes in and makes it so hard.
It's impossible.
When the champagne is just flowing and you're pouring for yourself, for your friends, that accurate count is the first thing to go. It stops being a number and just becomes this, endless flow.
Exactly. And the last bit of advice that Jordan got and overlooked was the plan for getting home.
The exit strategy.
The exit strategy. On New Year's Eve, just hoping to flag a taxi or get a ride share quickly,
Yeah.
you're basically guaranteeing a crisis.
You are. The cousin advised pre-booking something, having a designated spot to meet a car that was like blocks away from the main chaos.
And having backups.
And having backups. But, despite all that incredibly sound advice, those words were pretty quickly forgotten once Jordan got swept up in that electric rooftop atmosphere.
Okay, so let's shift to that moment, the core of the problem. This is where the careful planning completely failed. The material actually calls this the critical moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's the collision of that atmosphere, the endless champagne, and that immense social pressure. It created what it called a, quote, perfect storm.
And you can see the shift happen almost immediately after midnight. The big countdown is over. The planning part of the night is done.
Right.
And now the consumption just starts to accelerate. The immediate result was that judgment just became increasingly clouded.
That rational framework that Jordan brought into the night, the cousin's advice, the plan to pace,
Yeah.
it all just starts to dissolve.
It does. It gets washed away by the sheer sensory overload of the moment.
And the details of how it all unraveled are so instructive for anyone listening. It started with separation.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan lost track of the friends. In a packed, loud, dark rooftop party, this can happen in like 60 seconds. A quick trip to the bar, you turn around.
And the group has moved, and your safety net is just gone.
Gone. And what made it a million times worse, which the material highlights as a really critical and common failure, was the dead phone battery.
Ugh, yes. We have to really internalize this. Our phones are our primary safety device now.
They are everything.
When that battery dies, you don't just lose your ability to call someone. You lose your map, your rideshare apps, your mobile payment, your only way to reconnect with your people.
So Jordan was suddenly alone, impaired, totally disconnected, and facing this terrifying new reality.
Yeah, of having to navigate this massive moving crowd that had, in a split second, gone from feeling celebratory to feeling chaotic and dangerous.
That moment right there,
Yeah.
that feeling of being isolated and impaired, trying to push through that dense crowd, that is the definition of a planned night turning into a full-blown crisis.
The environment itself becomes a threat when you're separated and your thinking is compromised.
Definitely.
Now, what's important in this specific story is the fortunate intervention. And this is a really key piece of information for, any venue managers or security staff who might be listening.
Right.
A security guard who is clearly trained to spot this noticed Jordan's distressed state. It wasn't loud or aggressive behavior. It was just a look of disorientation, of vulnerability.
That's the key insight, isn't it? The staff being able to see that subtle shift from someone having fun to someone in genuine distress.
It is. And the care they provided was essential. The guard stepped in, got Jordan some water, which is huge for dehydration, found a quiet space away from all the noise and the lights, and, critically, helped get the phone charged.
Just enough juice.
Just enough to reconnect with friends and arrange for a safe ride home.
And Jordan's reflection on this afterward is really the core takeaway for all of us.
Yeah.
What should have been this story about a magical memory in Vegas,
Yeah.
it instead became this really profound turning point, a commitment to prioritizing wisdom and safety over just, recklessness in the future.
It's the realization that safety isn't some boring restriction. It's actually the foundation you need to have true, joyful, memorable moments.
Absolutely. So let's take that powerful personal story and zoom out a bit. The material we looked at gives this really systematic breakdown of the hazards of New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And it separates them into 6 distinct areas.
Okay.
So if you're looking for that more data-driven perspective, this is where it gets really interesting. We could start with focus area 1. Excessive consumption and health risks.
Right. This is the foundation of almost everything else. And we need to be clear for you on the terms. When we talk about binge drinking on New Year's Eve, the material is very specific. It's not just about drinking a lot. It's a specific pattern of consumption. For women, it's 4 or more standard drinks in about 2 hours. For men, 5 or more.
And on New Year's Eve, that 2-hour window gets repeated over and over.
Exactly. It's sustained over a much longer evening, maybe 6-8 hours. And because the celebrations are so long, your body's ability to process alcohol is just completely overwhelmed for a dangerous amount of time.
That duration is so key. It's not just the total volume of alcohol. It's the fact that your liver can't keep up.
Not even close.
We're talking an average processing rate of about 1 standard drink per hour. So when you introduce free-flowing champagne and constant toasts, like in Jordan's situation, your blood alcohol level spikes and it just stays there.
It stays dangerously elevated for much longer than a typical night out. And that prolonged impairment is what exponentially increases your risk for accidents, for poor decisions, for, overall vulnerability.
And we should also mention the long-term impact. The material really emphasizes that even if it's just once a year, these repeated patterns of extreme drinking contribute to serious health consequences down the line.
Yeah, like liver strain, cardiovascular issues. And it also just sets a bad precedent. It makes it harder to celebrate moderately in the future.
And crucially, we have to talk about mixing substances. The data shows this is a huge contributor to emergency room visits on New Year's Eve.
It is. When you combine alcohol with anything else, and that includes common prescription medications for, say, anxiety or sleep, the medical risks just skyrocket.
Because of synergistic effects.
Exactly. For instance, you take alcohol, which is a depressant, and you combine it with another depressant. That can lead to what's called profound central nervous system depression.
It sounds very bad.
It is. That's the mechanism that can cause your breathing to slow down or stop or cause you to lose consciousness.
Yeah.
The body's response is just highly unpredictable, especially when you're in a loud, crowded, and probably dehydrated state.
You really have to be so careful about what you're consuming and any medications you might be on. Okay, that leads right into focus area 2, safety, legal, and vulnerability hazards. The main idea here is that alcohol doesn't just make you a little clumsy.
No.
It directly impairs your prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain that handles judgment, impulse control, risk assessment.
All the things that keep you safe. And that leads directly to you taking risks you would never, ever consider when you're sober.
And the most serious, most documented danger here is drunk driving. The material is so explicit about this.
As it should be.
This is one of the most serious systemic dangers of New Year's Eve. And it's not just the one impaired driver, it's the sheer number of them on the road, combined with all the extra traffic. It puts everyone in danger.
Pedestrians, passengers, other sober drivers, everyone.
And the legal consequences are just immediate and devastating. The research we have highlighted that police enforcement is at its absolute maximum on this night.
They're out there looking for it.
They are. So if you get pulled over, you're looking at, huge fines, legal fees, mandatory education programs, and insurance hikes that can easily cost you over $10,000.
A very, very heavy price for one bad decision.
A huge price. And then there's personal safety, just your physical well-being.
Right. Intoxication makes you a much, much easier target for crime or for predatory behavior. When your situational awareness is gone, you're focused on having fun, not scanning your environment, your ability to spot danger or react to it is just severely reduced. You become, statistically speaking, a much more vulnerable person.
Jordan's story really drove home that specific threat of being separated from your group, losing that safety net.
It did.
But the material also stressed a threat that's maybe more silent, and that's drink spiking.
Yes. In crowded parties, this is described as a common threat, and it's often aimed at theft or something worse.
And it requires just constant vigilance. You have to realize that a lot of the substances used, they're odorless, they're tasteless.
Which means the first sign that something is wrong is often this sudden, severe disorientation or physical weakness that feels way out of proportion to what you've had to drink.
It's an insidious risk because it really relies on the chaos of the environment to go unnoticed.
It does. The advice is simple, but you have to follow it. Never leave your drink unattended. And don't accept open drinks from people you don't completely trust.
Right. And if you suddenly feel profoundly impaired in a way that doesn't make sense, you have to get help immediately, just like Jordan was fortunate enough to do. Okay, speaking of that chaos, let's link that to focus area 3, environmental and logistical challenges. These are the risks that exist in the environment itself, but they get magnified by impairment.
Let's start with crowd safety. In these big celebration zones like Times Square or the Vegas Strip, overcrowding is a huge structural hazard.
It really is.
We've seen tragedies where crowd density creates these dangerous crush dynamics. But even short of that, it just makes things like evacuation in an emergency extremely difficult.
Right. If a fire alarm goes off and a venue needs to be cleared, the sheer number of people, especially people who are impaired and moving slowly, can turn a simple exit into a really dangerous situation.
And, New Year's Eve happens in the winter for a lot of the world, so we can't forget weather risks.
That's a great point.
The combination of cold temperatures and alcohol is a really dangerous one. Alcohol makes you feel warmer.
Right, because it brings the blood to your skin.
Exactly. It's called peripheral vasodilation, but while you're feeling warmer, you're actually losing core body heat much faster.
So you could be standing outside waiting for a ride, impaired, not realizing how cold you actually are, and be at a real risk for hypothermia.
Or just slipping on ice. And that ties right into impaired coordination. Alcohol directly messes with your cerebellum, which is what controls your balance and motor skills.
So the risk of just simple accidents goes way up. Trips, falling downstairs, stepping off a curb wrong.
Yes. The material points out that emergency rooms see a very specific spike in orthopedic injuries on January 1st. Broken wrists, sprained ankles, concussions.
Wow.
All from simple falls that happen because your coordination is compromised in a chaotic place. The logistics of the night fail, and your body fails to compensate.
Okay, moving to focus area 4. Financial, legal, and communication consequences. These are the problems that really stick with you after the party's over.
The financial issues are almost a given when you're impaired. That loss of judgment we keep talking about, it often leads to just wild, excessive spending.
And this is where the data on surge pricing really hits hard. The research we saw showed rideshare rates jumping by like 400 or 500%.
Yeah, in major cities between 1 and 3 a.m. on January 1st. So that $20 ride home you were expecting suddenly becomes a $100 ride.
That's a huge unexpected expense on top of an already expensive night.
And that's not even counting the other impulsive decisions. Buying rounds of expensive drinks for strangers, over-tipping, maybe booking a flight on a whim.
Oh, wow.
The financial hangover is real, and seeing those credit card charges a few days later can really sour the start of your new year.
And legally, we touched on DUIs, which are, the big one.
Yeah.
But there are other things, public intoxication, disorderly conduct.
Minor fights that escalate into something serious because judgment is impaired and aggression is heightened.
The police know this. They are out in force, and their tolerance is low on this particular night. A celebration should not end with a court date.
Definitely not.
And let's circle back to Jordan's crisis and talk about technology failures. The dead phone battery is one part of it, but the material also points to a systemic problem. Network congestion.
Oh, this is a big one that people don't think about. When millions of people in a small area all try to send that Happy New Year text at the same time,
The network just crashes.
it overloads, calls won't go through, texts get delayed, data slows to a crawl, and it happens at the exact moment you most need your phone to work to coordinate your ride or find your friends.
So your digital lifeline, the thing you rely on for safety, is collectively compromised by everyone else using it.
Which is why having a non-digital backup plan, like a prearranged physical meeting spot, is just so much more reliable.
That's such a good point. Okay, let's shift our focus to an area that's deeply important but often gets overlooked. That's focus area 5, mental and emotional well-being.
Yeah, and this really starts with the burden of those unrealistic expectations we talked about at the beginning.
Right, the best night ever.
If you build up a single evening to be this magical, life-changing event, and then it's just a regular fine night, the letdown can be huge.
It can feel like a failure.
It can. It causes this sense of anticlimax or disappointment that can contribute to what people call the January blues or post-celebration depression.
And alcohol itself makes this so much more complicated. From anyone who already deals with anxiety or depressive symptoms, consuming a lot of alcohol is like a chemical roller coaster. It acts as a temporary stimulant and then as a major depressant. It just messes with your brain chemistry.
It does. It plays havoc with crucial neurotransmitters like dopamine and GABA. The result is often that your existing mental health issues get intensified.
So that temporary fun high is followed by this really brutal crash that can make feelings of anxiety and regret so much worse.
It turns a supposedly happy night into an emotional spiral that can last for days. It's a chemical recipe for feeling awful.
And we can't ignore the power of social pressure. The external pressure from friends to have one more drink, or just the implicit pressure of the environment to spend more or stay out later than you want to.
It contributes so much to bad decisions.
It really does. Learning how to set and hold your own boundaries, to be able to say, no, I'm good in the face of that pressure. That is such a critical skill.
It takes real self-awareness to stick to your plan when everyone around you is just going for it. But that self-control is what separates a night you control from a night that controls you.
That is very well put. And that brings us to our final area, focus area 6, the morning after. The post-celebration consequences. This is the cleanup.
And this is so important because it can defeat the whole purpose of that fresh start you were chasing.
For sure. I mean, we all know about the physical aftermath, the hangovers.
But let's be specific about what that is. It's not just a headache. It's severe dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, stomach irritation, and your body is still trying to process toxic byproducts.
So it's not just about feeling bad. It's about your productivity, your mood, your well-being being disrupted for days. If you spend January 1st and 2nd on the couch, you've already lost that fresh start momentum.
And then there's the social aftermath. Things you say or do while you're heavily intoxicated can really damage relationships.
The cringe factor.
The cringe factor, yeah. Words spoken, actions taken. They can have these lasting corrosive effects on friendships or partnerships. And having to apologize for behavior you barely remember is a terrible feeling that lasts much longer than the headache.
And finally, a very modern risk, reputational harm. The material warns about the permanent threat of social media exposure. In this era of smartphones, a bad decision, an embarrassing video, an ill-advised photo can be captured and shared instantly.
And it can live online forever. Potentially showing up years later and impacting your job prospects or your personal standing. The digital footprint of a bad night is permanent.
Wow. You know, that systematic breakdown, it really puts the whole thing in perspective. It moves the conversation so far beyond just don't drink too much.
It does. It makes you look at the structural factors, the legal ones, the neurological ones.
And it all comes back to Jordan's experience and that big realization at the end of it.
It does. We come back to that final piece of wisdom we pulled from all this. As that clock strikes midnight, the best beginnings are really built on wisdom and preparation, not on recklessness.
That is the absolute key takeaway. You can and should have immense joy and memorable celebrations, but you have to let safety be the thing that guides you.
It's the only way to make sure you're carrying forward memories that are actually worth remembering instead of regrets that you spend the new year trying to fix.
Yeah, the difference between a great night and a catastrophic one, it comes down to those simple things we've been talking about. Pacing yourself, staying with your people, and having that exit strategy locked down before the party even really gets going.
We would love to hear what resonated with you. Did you recognize any of these specific risk categories in your own past celebrations, perhaps from a friend's experience? What stands out to you as the most critical piece of advice for safely navigating a night as high stakes as New Year's Eve? Please share your opinions and experiences in the comments section below.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to the Party Animal Podcast. Make sure to check back in for future episodes, and please click that like button, turn on notifications, and subscribe to help this podcast bring more awareness to others while enjoying an amazing time minus the pitfalls.
Be safe out there.